Hey, what's up? It's me, Jenny V. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel for those of you who subscribed on the last video. Here we're going to talk about the truth, lies, and what's in between. Tonight's video is going to be about the Marilyn Monroe conspiracies. Sorry, heard a real weird sound in my house. Okay, probably one of the dogs. Anyway, so let's talk about Marilyn in her early life. She had a very rough childhood. She was born to her mother who was 15 years old when she had her. Her original name was Norma Jean Mortensen. Mortensen was her mother's husband at the time. But in 2022, they did a DNA test and found out that Marilyn's real father was Charles Stanley Gifford. And Charles Stanley Gifford was a co-worker of her mother's. So, her mother was born in Mexico to a Midwestern family, and then they migrated to California, and that's kind of how Marilyn ended up in LA. But being that Marilyn's mother was like 15 years old when she had her, she basically put Marilyn into an orphanage and like visited her on the weekends. So until Marilyn was about 7 years old, she just lived in an orphanage and saw her mom on the weekends. And then when she was 7 years old, she went to go live back with her mother because her mother was finally able to afford a small house. So she took Marilyn back out of the orphanage to come live with her. And I guess at some point in those years, her mother had another daughter. And Marilyn didn't find out about her sister until she was about 12. And then they didn't even meet until they were adults, actually. But so at 7 years old, she went back to live with her mother. Her mother was actually like a paranoid schizophrenic, so that like starts the whole mental health issues in Marilyn's family. And so a lot of people say that like part of why they believe that Marilyn may have overdosed herself is because she had mental illness and she was suffering from like depression, mood swings, all kinds of different things. And that could be true, but just hear me out on some of the conspiracies that they have about, her death and everything like that, and decide for yourself. So at 7 years old, she went to live back with her mother, and then in 1935, her mother finally started seeking help for her paranoid schizophrenia, and so Marilyn started bouncing around between orphanages and family friends. And then in 1937, she finally went to live with like a family friend, but I guess the family friend's husband supposedly molested Marilyn. So Marilyn no longer stayed with them. She went back to bouncing around from family friend to orphanages and whatever. So Marilyn had a very rough childhood. And at 16 years old, just to get out of the orphanage almost, she got married, actually. Her first husband was James Dougherty, and she was married to him from 1942 to 1946. Some of the stories and sources that I was reading said that, Marilyn spent most of that marriage in the bathroom. She was 16 years old. She really probably didn't want to get married, but since she was bouncing around from house to house to house and didn't really have any type of a stable life, she just thought maybe if she got married and settled down that would bring some normalcy to her situation. But she didn't actually want to be anybody's wife, and at 16 years old. So that marriage obviously didn't last long. It was just a few years. And then during World War II, she met a photographer and became a pinup model, which led into short-lived films. And then she got a contract with Fox and Columbia in 1950, and that's when her career really picked up. And by 1950, when her career really started to pick up, she was no longer married to Mr. Dougherty. In 1942 to 1946, she was married to Joe DiMaggio. Now, like I said, her career picked up, so now she's mingling with the celebrities in Hollywood, and she's getting to know all these other famous people. And Joe DiMaggio, what do you really say about him? But she married him. She wasn't married to him for very long, but they had a very close relationship. In fact, Joe DiMaggio and her half-sister that I previously mentioned, and along with Marilyn's business manager, the three of them planned Marilyn's funeral together, even though at the time Marilyn wasn't married to Joe anymore. But some of the sources I was reading said that towards the end closer to when Marilyn actually died, that her and Joe were dating again, and they were talking about possibly, getting remarried. So I thought that maybe that was why he was involved in the funeral, that they had actually been close at the time of her death. But then some of the conspiracy theories I'm going to tell you about may make you think otherwise. Some scandals began in her career after 1950 that arose with nude photos from before she hit it big, before she got her career started. And while for most people, when a scandal breaks out, it kind of like dampens your career, stops you from working, especially back then when everyone was so conservative. When it surfaced that there was nude photos taken of Marilyn and going around, everyone thought this was going to hurt her career. But as we know, to this day, that is not what happened. It actually helped her career. She then started doing centerfolds, and she was actually the first person to be on the cover of Playboy magazine. From 1956 to 1961, she got married again to Arthur Miller. I guess here is where you kind of want to insert that Marilyn was a little bit of a hopeless romantic out there, just like searching for love, searching for her one, someone who was going to take care of her and be her safety and, everything that a woman looked for back then when they were thinking about marriage. Some people say that she desperately wanted to be a mother and she wanted to have a baby, but the sources that I read said that she was pregnant 3 times. All 3 times was while she was married to Arthur Miller, so it said that he was the father all 3 times, but there was some rumors that the last one may or may not have been from Arthur, but all 3 times she miscarried the baby. Twice was while she was filming movies. And she kind of blamed herself. She regularly used alcohol and drugs and blamed herself for her inability to have a baby. Now, she's in the limelight. She's famous. She, after the centerfolds and Playboy and all that, she was a sex icon. So, I don't really know how having a baby would fit into all of that for her, and maybe that was confusing for her. Do I want the career? Do I want the family? But either way, Marilyn never actually mothered any children, although there were some stories out there trying to say that she did. It's not true. So let's get started on the conspiracy theories. In 1973, Norman Mailer wrote a book stating a bunch of conspiracy theories, and so this led to in 1982 they decided to reopen Marilyn's case. Now at this time her official cause of death was overdose of barbiturates. Basically she took enough pills to pass away. Trying to be careful about my words here. But they quickly closed the case, saying lack of evidence to support foul play. But it was Norman Mailer's book that led them to reopen the case in the first place, stating all these conspiracy theories that he thought about her death and how some of the circumstances around it were very fishy. Most popular theories on her death included the Kennedy brothers, both John and Robert, as they went by Jack and Bobby. Bobby was the Attorney General of the United States at the time, and Jack was actually JFK, the President of the United States. Now everyone kind of has the thought in their head that Marilyn had a big affair with JFK, the president, because of her whole birthday song for him at the White House and all that other stuff that everyone has made very popular back then and now. But actually, when you start digging into the stories, I don't think it was Jack that she was after. Now, my take on all of it, after reading a bunch of stories about her relationship with both the brothers, at the end of the day, it seemed like she had a much closer relationship with Bobby than she did with Jack. Now, what I think is that Jack and Bobby were kind of like frat boys. You know what I'm saying? like to party, like to hang out, down to do whatever. And so I kind of got the feeling that, like, she met the Kennedys. She wanted to rub elbows with them and their friends and be in the inner circle. She was very fascinated about their jobs and the things that they did and the things that they knew. And it wasn't really clear when she met them. Some say it was at a dinner party in New York City and that Frank Sinatra introduced them. But then some people date it back a few years to like 1957 that she met Jack at a ball. But needless to say, so what I think happened is that she met Jack and Bobby, and at one time she had, whatever, a little fling with Mr. President. But because Mr. President was married, she kind of set her sights on someone else. And I kind of got the vibe that, like, she slept with Jack and then Jack passed her to Bobby, like the good old boys kind of thing. And I guess Marilyn had a deeper connection with Bobby, so she continued to kind of follow him around and want to spend time with him and would call and check in on him and try to meet with him when he was in town. And towards the end of her life, it said that Bobby had gone to her house that day and they were having a conversation. Now, the source that I read this from, I think, said that her maid overheard the conversation, and Bobby was basically there to, like, end the affair, say, we're not going to do this. But in Marilyn's mind, she had thought that they were going to become closer, that he was going to propose and that she was going to transform into, a politician's wife. But that's not what he was there to do. He came to basically tell her that it couldn't go on, they couldn't continue to see each other, but he just kept asking, where is it? Where is what? So some of the sources were saying that she had like a little red book that, and I don't know if this little red book is different from her diary or if the diary and the little red book are one and the same. It wasn't very clear, but she basically had a little book, and like she would write down the things that she learned from the Kennedys, secrets that they told her, things that she knew about them, any kind of like stuff that she had on them, she probably would have wrote in this little red book. So when Bobby came over to, end the situation, he's, where's the book? Where's the book? Or where is it? Where is it? He's looking for the book because he doesn't want her to expose any of the secrets or, expose them for anything that they were doing. And it wasn't very clear if he found what he was looking for, but in some of the stories I was reading, it seemed like they got into a fight. He was upset because he couldn't find what he was looking for. She was upset because he ended the relationship, so she just, ran in her bedroom, shut the door or whatever. And when, I guess because Bobby was Attorney General at the time, so like he had his security team with him, so somebody else was there, and I guess they went to knock on the door. And I mean, the stories don't really say it, but the conspiracy theory is that she was dead on the bed and that they kind of covered it up. I don't know if they fed her the pills or she did it or whatever the case may be, but she was laying face down on the bed, and his security guard says, don't worry about it, we're going to make sure that she gets a phone call. Kind of like setting it up that like he wasn't there, he wasn't the last person to talk to her. She was alive when he would have left the house, so even if people figured out that he was there, they couldn't pin it on him. So that's conspiracy number one. So, and then the other conspiracy theory I had was that Bobby was there to end the relationship. Was it because the Kennedy family didn't approve of Marilyn and her sex symbol status? Was she not good enough to be a part of their family, and that's why they told him, like, you can't do this? Was it because Bobby was actually married with children and cheating on his wife? That's some of the conspiracy theories, but like I said, I think, the Kennedy boys were like frat brothers, and they kind of just passed her back and forth, and maybe Bobby treated her a little bit less of a booty call, more of like a person, and that's why she liked him more than she liked Jack. But either way, because of the positions that those boys were in, whatever she knew about them, they couldn't let her, just walk away from the situation. And I think when Bobby went to her house to end the situation, she most likely threatened to expose them. But because she died that night, she never got the chance to do so. And the Kennedy boys were known to do a lot of questionable things. J. Edgar Hoover was actually the director of the FBI, I think, at the time. And he didn't like Jack. And the Kennedys were always trying to find a way to get J. Edgar Hoover out of the FBI, out of his position. But basically, J. Edgar Hoover started like a file on Marilyn, on the boys, and whenever he even kept this file like in a special safe, and it grew really big. So he had a nice big safe full of like these secrets about Marilyn, about the brothers, about the things that he had on them. So whenever they would put out rumors that they were trying to get rid of him or they were trying to replace him, he would just pull out some of the tidbits from his little safe of secrets and push it at them and hand deliver it and just basically squash any thoughts of getting rid of him. He wasn't going anywhere. But then other theories were saying that J. Edgar Hoover kept a file on Marilyn because she had communist ties, or that she was a communist sympathizer. And when you dug a little bit deeper into that theory, the reason why a lot of people thought that she was a communist sympathizer was mostly because of Arthur Miller, her third husband, because he had a lot of communist ties and he was a communist sympathizer. So they kind of like watched her because of him. And because she was hanging out with the president, the attorney general, everyone wants to know what's being said, what's going on, how much does she know, could she, jeopardize Homeland Security. So, another theory that I came across was that the mafia did something, like assassinated her. So at this time, I guess the Kennedys were going hard against the mafia and trying to, bring justice upon them for all the things that they were doing at the time. And in retaliation, some say that the mafia put a hit out on Maryland. And then some even went so far as to say that Jimmy Hoffa took the contract. And we all know what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. And because he's no longer around, no one can verify whether that was true, not true, whatever. So it's up for what you believe in. Then because of so Marilyn died August 4th. Sorry, my notes are kind of all over the place. August 4th, 1962, I think it was. So August 4th, 1962, and like I was saying, she had mental illness history in her family. She was very depressed about her failed marriages, her miscarriages, being dumped by Bobby and being passed around by Jack, and just really starting to feel like her worth was only physical and not anything more than that to anyone around her, because her career depended on how she looked, and her friends only loved her because she was popular in the film industry and in the photography industry. And so if she didn't have that, would she have had any friends? So there was a lot going on for her close to the time of her death. So her doctors had prescribed her, different medications, try to help her sleep, try to keep her healthy and everything like that. And then some say that maybe she was over-prescribed things and that her death was covered up as a suicide because her doctors didn't want to get in trouble for what they were giving her or allowing her to take, or that she was even mixing pills. But again, she self-admitted that she was regularly taking drugs and regularly drinking. So I don't know why that theory made a lot of sense, but it came up a few times in my research. And then another thing was that maybe the maid covered it up, because for some reason, because the maid was in the house when it all went down. She was in the house long enough to hear the conversation that her and Bobby were having. But she died. So the call about her death that night didn't get made until 3 o'clock in the morning. But the time of death actually was somewhere between 8 and 11. So what took between, let's say it was 11, between 11 and 3 a.m., what took so long for that call to get made? Did no one find her? Did no one know? Which definitely cannot be the case, because the first people to show up on the scene after, the calls went out was the FBI. Because when the police showed up, the FBI was already there, but the police had just gotten the call. So they weren't really sure how the FBI beat them there. And that's what started, a lot of the rumors about, did she do it to herself or did someone else do it? Because why was the FBI there? How did they find out first? And what took so long between 11 and 3 a.m.? What was going on? I'm not really sure what I believe, but I think the one that I tend to lean more towards is the one about her and Bobby, because it seemed like they had a love affair going on that maybe meant more to Marilyn than it did to Bobby. And when things went south, Bobby didn't want to be exposed, didn't want his family to be embarrassed, didn't want to lose his job for maybe some of the things that he and his brother had told her. So in order to keep her quiet, some things have to happen sometimes. And when you're in that type of position, things got to get covered up. I mean, if anyone out here has ever seen the show Scandal on ABC, that'll tell you everything you need to know about a fixer. And I do believe fixers are a real thing, okay? There's nobody out there that's squeaky clean and doesn't do anything wrong. Let's see what else. A little known fact about Marilyn is that she actually had a stutter. A lot of people didn't. I didn't know that. I don't think a lot of people knew that, but she actually had a stutter, and Marilyn was Jewish. And she practiced her Jewish religion until she died. Then recently, I think I saw like on TikTok, Facebook, or somewhere where Shaq says that he owns Marilyn Monroe. When, I mean, it's kind of true, but not really. So a company called ABG owns a lot of celebrity estates and their names and the rights to certain things about those celebrities. And Marilyn is one of the celebrities that ABG owns. And an investor in ABG, a significant investor in ABG, is Shaq. So in essence, Shaq does own part of Marilyn Monroe. At the time of her death, she was only worth about $800,000, but in today's money, like transferred over, it would be millions. So she would be worth millions today if she was still alive. And in fact, she is actually still making money based on the way that she had her will set up, and the way that her estate was. She actually is still making money today, long after she's passed away. So that's going to bring us to the end of all my research. And be interested to know what you guys out there think. Did Marilyn overdose herself accidentally? I'm sure it was not intentionally trying to end her death, or was she? Did the CIA do it because they thought she was a communist? Did the mafia do it to get back at the Kennedy brothers? Did maybe Jackie Kennedy have something to do with it because she found out that her husband was sleeping with Marilyn? That one wasn't very popular, but it was like a snippet somewhere that I saw. Or do you think that Bobby had something to do with it and he covered it up because he had a lot of strong ties to her and didn't want to be found out? I kind of tend to go both ways when I think about it, that either she did or he did. But the rest of the theories, didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. It didn't really hit home for me. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And if I need to dig deeper, if anyone wants to know anything more about Marilyn, I could do a whole other video. Again, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys all next time. Thanks.